Hey everybody, BT here. I'm down here in Arkansas. I'm finally going to be able to do something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I just found out I'm going to get to do a couple things I want to do for a long time. And I might be able to do something I never thought I'd get a chance to do. So let's go check it out. I'll show you what I mean.
Walk along the levee, silhouetted by a crescent moon. When the sun starts rising, hitting 90 before the clock strikes noon. Don't you know the days and nights, dreams drift slowly by.
So here we are back in Arkansas. We're going to go to Marion, Arkansas. Something there I bet you ain't heard about, and I want to talk about it a little bit, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Right now, we are on the Great River Road, and that's one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time, was get up and run the Great River Road, and I ain't never done it. So, I looked out on the map, and I was like, hey, it's right there. So I decided to detour and jump onto it, and we'll run it the rest of the way to Marion. I could be over there on the doggone interstate, but what fun is that? I mean, 75 mile an hour, fighting for position, other cars blowing you off the road and stuff. Psh, it don't sound like no fun. Besides that, if I remember right, this channel ain't called Interstate Traveler, now is it? So, we're here, and you're probably wondering, we're where? Well, there's a reason you're wondering where we're where. We'll go with it. Anyway, yeah, we are where we are because the place that I really want to go is on private property. It's on a farmer's field, and I don't have permission to go there. I don't know the farmer to get permission to go there. So I'm not going to go there. And also because it's a rather historic, or at least it should be a rather historic place. I really don't want to tell everybody where it's at, because sure, I've only got 183 of you now, but for all I know, there'll be 5,000 people watch this video. There might be 13, I don't know. But people don't need to be traipsing across Felder's Place to go and look at literally nothing. And that's the kicker. There's nothing there. It's a soybean field. What you would look at is 30 feet underneath it. So before I get into that, if I was to ask you, what was the greatest maritime disaster in American history? Most people would say something like the Titanic. Never mind the fact the Titanic was a British ship. But that's neither here nor there. That's the one everybody knows about. And you'd be hard-pressed to think of any others. When the Titanic went down in 1912, 1,496 people lost their lives in that shipwreck. The Sultana, we don't even know for sure. Somewhere between 1,400 and 1,800, possibly up to 2,000 people. Drowned, froze to death, burned, or crushed in the sinking of the Sultana. The Sultana was a steamboat. She was a side wheeler. That means she was a paddle boat, and she had the big paddles on either side of the boat. Now, a lot of people are familiar with paddle boats. You usually think of the types you see in movies that's always got the paddle at the back. Those were actually less common on the Mississippi River than the side wheelers was. Side wheelers were set up that way. It was easier to navigate these rivers because some of them most of them you could slow down one side or even stop one side and run it opposite of the other. Allows better maneuverability. So anyway, the Sultana, she was a side wheeler. It was 260 feet long, 42 feet wide. She could carry 376 crew and passenger plus cargo, and she could carry gobs of cargo. she literally hundreds of tons. I mean, when she went down the Mississippi River, she had just recently offloaded 200 hogshead, if I remember right, of sugar. My understanding is we're looking at 100 to 120 ton of sugar she just offloaded. The problem with that is the sugar was kind of ballast for the men she hauled. You see, the Sultana was hauling between 1,800 and 2,300 people. Yeah, you heard me right. I started out saying it could handle 376, 375 crew and passenger. She was hauling between 18 and 2,300 people. So why don't you know about the Sultana? Well, it was a lot of circumstances going on at the time. On April 9th, Lee surrendered. That was big news. Ending the Civil War. Okay, cool. On the 14th, Lincoln was assassinated. That obviously big news as well. On the 26th, Booth was caught and killed. And then on the 27th, the Sultana blew up. Most places, if it was in the newspaper at all, it was on the back page. With that kind of heavy news stories and stuff going on, I guess the nation numbed to death anyway. That may be the reason it didn't make front page news. Regardless, it was missed by many people even when it happened. So on the 15th of April, Captain James Mason, who was part owner of the Sultana, he was in Cairo, Illinois, and he got news of Lincoln's assassination. Now, you have to remember, at this time, there were still telegraph lines cut all over the place, and in the South, news did not travel very fast. So he kind of decided he wanted to be the guy who spread the news of Lincoln's assassination throughout the South. So he grabbed a whole bunch of newspapers and he took off downriver. Now, while this was going on, the Union was also working with the Confederacy on prisoner exchange. So they had moved prisoners, the Union prisoners, from Confederate prison camps, namely Andersonville and Cahoba. You say that right? I don't remember. Anyway, we'll come back to it. They had shipped them from there to Vicksburg, Mississippi. From there, they were going to be taken up north and released. And they were paying, the government was paying $5 a head for a soldier, $10 a head for an officer. Captain Mason was not in the best of financial situations, we'll leave it there. And when he stopped at Vicksburg, he was approached by a quartermaster named Hatch. And Hatch said, look, you give me a kickback, I'll guarantee you 1,400 men on your boat. Sounded like pretty good terms to Mason, so he said, okay, never mind the fact we're way overloaded. Well, sounds like a good idea. So he continued on down to New Orleans. Now, about this time, they discovered they had a leak in the boiler. And I cannot remember for nothing if it was while they were in New Orleans or just after they left New Orleans. Doesn't matter. What's important is they have a leak in the boiler. It needs to be repaired. And Mason doesn't want to miss the shipment of soldiers coming from Vicksburg. So rather than repair the boilers properly, they patched it. They got to Vicksburg. It was just a perfect storm for everything that could go wrong. They got to Vicksburg. When they got to Vicksburg, somebody screwed up their count. Instead of the 1,400 men that Hatch was supposed to receive, he received somewhere between 1,800 and 2,200. And passengers, and horses, and mules, and cargo. 200,000 pounds of sugar. Probably more. Never mind the coal in the boat. And then they proceeded upriver. At this point, it's just a miracle they're even going, because not only are they terribly overloaded, the decks of the ship are sagging from the weight of men. It's basically pretty much standing room only. And on top of everything else, we've got a busted boiler we're limping along with, and the river was flooded, and it was flooded, I mean, big time flooded. She was miles out of the banks, which leads us to where we are now, because we're about 7-8 miles north of Memphis, when the boiler exploded. First one boiler, then 2 others blew up. Now mind you, people are crowded against each other all over this ship. When the first boiler went off, it ruptured the 2 next to it, maybe 3 depending on who you're talking to. Hundreds of men were killed instantly. In a lot of ways, they were the lucky ones, because what happened next is the people who weren't killed instantly were hurled from the decks of the Sultana into the freezing cold ice runoff melt that had flooded the Mississippi River. Mind you, these guys had just come from Andersonville and other prison camps. They didn't have any spare fat for insulation. A lot of them couldn't swim anyway, didn't have the strength to do it even if they could. And then they landed in the freezing cold water. And it just goes downhill from there. Because what happened is, after the boilers exploded, they left the fireboxes completely exposed, and the decks sagged, and men were dumped alive into the fireboxes to be burned alive. And then the smokestacks fell. When the smokestacks fell, they landed on hundreds of men, killing them instantly or maiming them terribly. Now we have a boat on fire, men being burned alive in the firebox, men drowning in the water, men crushed under smokestacks. Oh, did I mention that back then they used highly flammable varnish and lacquer to waterproof the boats? So the boat went up like a tinderbox. There was a heavy north wind that night, and it was blowing the fire to the rear of the boat. So some of the folks on the front of the boat actually kind of breathed a sigh of relief. They might get out of this unscathed. And then one of the side wheels broke off. And when the side wheel broke, the boat spun into water. And now the front half of the boat is dealing with the fire. But yeah, so men are in the water, men are drowning. The explosion was heard all the way in Memphis. It's 7 miles away. Men were floating past the docks in Memphis, alerting, hollering out for help and everything else. There were already a couple boats en route to come try to help. There wasn't a whole lot they could do. Somewhere between 1,580 and 2,000 people lost their lives that night, right here along the banks of what used to be the Mississippi River. Of course, the river's not here anymore. She's a few miles that way. The river's changed course several times since. The Sultana on fire, drifting down the river, snagged on some trees, and then she sank. And she's pretty much lost until the early 90s, when they managed to find remnants of a burned ship underneath the soybean field down here. And that's where she sits to this day. And most people have no idea she's even here. Heck, I grew up 150 miles from here. I didn't even know any of this happened. It's just too much. I can't tell you this story. I would like to. I can't. That's the reason I've actually spoke with the history guy, and watched his video on YouTube, and I'm going to provide a link to his video in this video because he tells it better than I ever could. So if you want to go see that, go check it out. No one was ever held responsible for this mess. Of course, Hatch died in the fire, or the explosion, or he drowned. We're not really sure. He was never seen from again. The quartermaster was politically connected, and he never saw a peep out of it. The clerk that was loading the ship was the original court-martial, but his court-martial was overturned. They decided that it was a legitimate mistake, apparently. So yeah, I mean, I wish I had a pretty story to tell, but there's nothing pretty about it. There were men that survived. They held reunions until 41, I believe, when the last man died, aged 96 years old. He was 20 years old when the Sultana blew up. It should be mentioned that these Union officers that were drowning in the water, when they got the attention of the people on the banks, it was here in Marion, Arkansas, and areas like this, where men went out in the middle of the night in the freezing water to save these men. These men who were Union soldiers, who a few weeks earlier they would have gladly bayoneted without batting an eye. Because the men that saved them, a lot of them were Confederate soldiers. It's very humbling to sit here after having gone through the museum and seen the model of the Sultana and seen the pictures of the men coming out of Andersonville and everything. I really should have put more time between being there and being here because it really kind of had an effect on me. So with that, yeah, I'm going to say again, make sure to go check out the History Guys channel. Make sure to go check out the Sultana video. It's linked below there. And go check out the Sultana Museum if you're in the area. It's really awesome. We'll catch y'all later.
The current was cold, the river was wide, a mile to either side away from the burning Sultana.